Howdy y'all, I'm Ghost6 and I'm here today to give an honest review on the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 movie. Now, if you could consider liking and subscribing, it would be very much appreciated. But if you get to the end of the video and say, hey, that's not for me, then by all means turn that into a dislike. So for this, I will start off with a spoiler-free review, right? Until this point on the screen. And then from there, I'll go on to my spoiler review. Personally, this is probably one of the best MCU movies in my opinion. Now, don't get me wrong, it has its errors, but this movie just did so much for the Guardians, right, as a trilogy. The characters all had great growth and development, though it did feel like they set Star-Lord back a tiny bit since the holiday special in Love and Thunder, with the acceptance of Gamora's death, right? But again, I enjoyed the jokes, and personally, I found 90% of the jokes to actually land and not feel awkward or forced. Also, the CGI looked amazing. It didn't look as bad as all the other shows and movies that we have seen, like Miss Marvel or even Thor: Love and Thunder, right? And that's its own category on itself, right? Then they also brought in comic book things and actually made it work. Unlike some of the other media and shows, I'm looking at you, Spider-Man Unlimited. And then the villain, he was just so good and compelling, right? And unlike most of the Marvel movies, they didn't try to make you like him at all. It wasn't like, oh, well, the hero killed my dad, so let me feel bad, or I'm trying to save half of all life in the universe by killing half of all life. No, they were just like, fuck you, this man has a god complex and will flex it on everyone, right? So this kind of relates back to the Green Goblin in No Way Home, right? Where this man just wants to sow chaos. Obviously, with the High Evolutionary, it's different, and he doesn't want to do that in particular. But again, he's just a straight up menace. And then, damn, this movie still has me in awe, right? And it's been a couple days since I've seen it, right? I saw it on Saturday, and I usually try to give a movie a few days to make sure that it wasn't just an adrenaline rush that was getting to me and made me like it, right? Because I wanted an honest review. I wanted to be completely biased when it came to it, but I'm just still in awe over this movie. And then there's also the fact that I feel like you don't even need to watch every single Marvel project to actually catch up, right? There are some movies you have to watch, the last two Avengers movies, right, with Infinity War and Endgame, and then obviously the Guardians of the Galaxy movies and the holiday special, right? But again, as opposed to some of the other movies, it's not like you have to watch Captain America, Iron Man, all the different projects and the shows, right? You could just honestly watch 5 movies and you're caught up, and that's amazing. And as you can probably tell by the trailers and if you follow any of the behind the scenes stuff, you could tell most of the actors and I think James Gunn himself is done with the Guardians movie. So this was supposed to be more of a send-off moment for the Guardians of the Galaxy as a character team, right? As a team. And it was just such a good way to end such an amazing trilogy. Now I'm going to go into the spoiler part of my review, right? So again, be warned in 3, 2, 1. Now, like the trailer emphasized, there's a huge focus on Rocket, right? Which is amazing. I always loved him. I loved him in the first Guardians. I loved him in the second. And he was always my, personal favorite character, right? But they also don't let this go a little overboard. They give each character a chance to grow and develop. For example, Star-Lord coming to terms with old Gamora's death. Or Mantis feeling like everyone views her as a useless person. Drax just being a dumb, strong guy. Or Kraglin learning the Yaka arrow. And there was just so many more of these scenes, but obviously I can't lump the entire movie into this review. Otherwise, I might get copyrighted and it would just be too long, right? I personally wasn't a fan of how this Groot looked. But again, he isn't supposed to look like old Groot from the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, which is because, in case you didn't hear, that Groot from Guardians of the Galaxy died. Now you may be saying oh, what? Then why is there still Groot? And that's because the Groot we have seen since the end of Volume 1 onwards is actually his kid, right? Now they do portray Star-Lord a little backwards in my opinion, because in case you didn't watch it, with Thor and Love and Thunder, they're oh, okay, well, I feel shitty, but at least I felt shitty about someone, right? And in this, it's just not really trying, like he's just getting drunk and not caring anymore, right? Which of course makes him ignore his responsibilities as captain and team leader of the Guardians, right? And obviously with this, it comes with consequences, and that's with Rocket being in a near-death situation and needing to be hospitalized, right? Now, with the rest of the characters, it's amazing to see how much they have like changed throughout all the movies. Like Nebula actually has the vibranium arm from the holiday special, and with Rocket upgrading it to do some really crazy ass shit, right? That like her normal arm would not be able to do, right? And then there's Kraglin, who's been practicing with the Yaka arrow, but still can't do much with it, so that's kind of funny, and also like goes on to show how much he grows towards the end. Mantis, again, she gets bullied by everyone, so that's kind of sad. Gamora teams up with the Ravagers, and that's like her new family because, again, she doesn't have any of their memories with the Guardians. Then there's with Rocket, right? And since he was on the brink of death, we get to see what the High Evolutionary did to him, and more in particular, how he put a failsafe in him that made it to where if anyone like did surgery on Rocket or exposed him to anything, he would just die immediately, right? This forces the team to find a code that will shut that off, right? Because we all love Rocket, so they love Rocket, and you know, you don't want to see him die, right? Then we also see Warlock, right? And he was the person who hospitalized Rocket in the first place, right? And we learned that it wasn't an Infinity Stone that gave birth to him in his little cocoon, right? And if it was taken after he was born, right? And the reason was because I think it was either supposed to be the Mind Stone or Soul Stone, one of the two, that was supposed to give birth to him, like what everyone thought initially. But obviously Thanos got the Soul Stone on Vormir, and the Mind Stone Vision had, so it didn't make sense. So I'm assuming this is just some random power battery, you know, could be like the Annual X batteries from the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, but like maybe more powerful, and that's what gave birth to him. But it is kind of funny because they did break how he is in the comics, which personally I'm fine with. I've been more flexible with that, and I'm like, oh, okay, if they incorporate something in the comics, cool. If they butcher something entirely and it doesn't even make sense or it is cool, then I'll have a problem. But with this, it was actually kind of funny how they did this, because he got released early from his cocoon, so he acted like a child most of the movie, right? And it was just hilarious to see. And obviously, with the Guardians of the Galaxy having such an amazing soundtracks throughout the movies, you were bound to think like, oh, well, how's the soundtrack, right? Personally, I don't find it as good as the other two movies, and I guess Infinity War, because, you know, they were in that. But I don't think it was supposed to be like Star-Lord's music, right? Because since they put an emphasis on rock and him liking music now, it was more early 2000s music, which is definitely not Star-Lord, and I'm personally fine with. I like the idea of each character having their own type of music, because like the real world, no one's gonna like the same thing. So it was really cool to see, right? Also, I love how they let Drax like grow and have something that wasn't just, I'm good for destruction, right? Like Drax the Destroyer. It was like, for example, in the movie, he has this moment where he speaks a language that Mantis can't even speak, right? And it just goes to show like, oh, okay, he's growing. And then towards the end of the movie, he starts dancing. He dances. Like throughout all the Guardians movies, he said like dancing's for weaklings. And there he is. He's just dancing, and it's so nice to see, right? Also, oh my fucking god, this movie had me so emotional so many times. Like, every scene with Rocket literally had me in tears, right? Then his acceptance towards the end, that he was a raccoon, because he saw his cage, and he just says, I'm Rocket Raccoon, and you're just like, fuck yes! Like, it was so dope, right? And it doesn't just do emotional the entire time. The humor is just so perfect, and even caught me off guard a couple of times and had me dead in the theaters, right? Like, there's a moment when it looks like Star-Lord's about to die, right? And then we see Adam Warlock just come in, and he does like the painting thing, you know? And I was just laughing so hard, and it was only me and my girlfriend who were laughing this hard. It was funny and it was hilarious. And arguably one of the best parts about this movie is the High Evolutionary himself, right? because I found the actor's portrayal of this character to actually be really great, right? I don't know how accurate he is to the comics because I don't remember too much about him. I know he created Counter-Earth. I know his crappy incarnation from the Spider-Man Unlimited show with the Counter-Earth thing, right? But I never really knew him in the comics. But in this movie, they didn't try to make him some sympathetic villain that was justified. They actually force you to hate him in so many ways. It's like he's egotistical. He enjoys torturing people. He enjoys like grabbing people's faces really hardly, right? And you could tell this movie just has a different vibe to it, from the aggressiveness to literally even the cussing, right? I don't think there's been a single MCU movie that has cussed as many times as this movie did. Obviously, if it was like in the MCU and not like a Fox project like Deadpool or something, right? And they even dropped an F-bomb, an uncensored F-bomb. And that was just funny to me. Personally, like I said, this is one of my favorite movies from the MCU, and it's just so great to see the difference in everyone's reaction to the MCU now. Because with the recent MCU movies, people tend to be like, oh, well, the MCU is doomed. Like, all these movies and shows sucked. And like, the reviews of like every movie were like, oh, it's doomed, right? And that kind of has me a little pissed, because here's a little side tangent. With critics and people, like, they always think that nothing good came out after Endgame. And you may be saying like, oh, well, Doctor Strange sucked, or Thor sucked, or Miss Marvel sucked, or any of this stuff, right? But you also gotta think, there were good movies. Shang-Chi was a great movie. Moon Knight was a good show. What If came out afterwards. That's a good cartoon. And then also No Way Home came out, right? So people need to give Marvel a little more slack and actually trust the process. Like, don't get me wrong, they weren't doing the best they could have like they were doing before, but with this movie, it shows the steps that they're going through now, right? Now, that was my video for today. I really do hope you guys liked it, and if you had any suggestions on what you'd like for me to cover in future videos, or maybe a better way to structure my videos, or just anything in general, but I really appreciate it, and peace.